Professor Zxylop slithered into the classroom, his gelatinous body leaving a faint trail of slime on the pristine floor. The eager faces, or what passed for faces, of his students greeted him, their antennae twitching with anticipation. Today was a special day in Galactic Sciences 101 at the prestigious University of Xenobiology on planet Squish. They were about to have their first encounter with a real, live Deathworlder. "Settle down," Class Zxylop gurgled, his voice modulator struggling to keep up with his excitement. "Today we have a very special guest. Please welcome a human." The classroom erupted in a cacophony of gasps, clicks, and what sounded suspiciously like someone losing control of their methionine sacs. A tall, bipedal creature sauntered into the room, grinning from ear to ear, which, to the aliens, looked like a terrifying display of bone. "Hey there, space cadets," the human bellowed, causing several students to instinctively activate their defensive mucus shields. "Name's Dave. Dave the human. Nice to meet ya." Professor Zxylop's eye stalks quivered with delight. "Class, this is the moment we've all been waiting for. A chance to study a real Deathworlder up close. Now who wants to ask the first question?" A tentative appendage rose from the back of the room. It belonged to Blorp, a amorphous blob of sentient goo. "Mr. Dave the human," Blorp burbled nervously, "is it true that your species regularly ingests dihydrogen monoxide?" Dave's eyebrows shot up. "Die what now?" "Oh, you mean water. Heck yeah, we drink that stuff all the time. Can't get enough of it." The class collectively recoiled in horror. Professor Zxylop's gelatinous form quivered with excitement. "Fascinating. And how often do you partake in this extreme behavior?" Dave scratched his head, looking genuinely confused. "I dunno, maybe 8 glasses a day. More if I'm working out or something." The sound of several students fainting punctuated his statement. One particularly brave Zorgan in the front row raised a pincered appendage. "But isn't dihydrogen monoxide incredibly dangerous? It can cause severe tissue damage in its solid form, and in its gaseous state, it can cause terrible burns." Dave couldn't help but laugh, a sound that sent shivers through the class. "Oh man, you guys are killing me. It's just water, for crying out loud. Yeah, ice can be slippery, and steam can burn you, but it's also what keeps us alive." Professor Zxylop's curiosity was piqued. "Keeps you alive? How so, Mr. Dave?" "Well," Dave began, settling into lecture mode, "water is essential for pretty much every bodily function we have. It regulates our body temperature, helps transport nutrients, removes waste. Heck, our bodies are about 60% water." A collective gasp echoed through the classroom. One student, a floating gas bag named Poof, actually deflated slightly in shock. "You mean to tell us," Professor Zxylop said, his voice modulator struggling to convey his astonishment, "that your bodies are majority composed of a substance that can cause drowning, erosion, and even dissolve certain metals?" Dave nodded, a mischievous glint in his eye. "Yep. And that's not even the half of it. Wait till you hear about what we breathe." The class leaned forward, a mixture of fear and fascination evident in their various sensory organs. "We breathe a mixture of gases," Dave continued, clearly enjoying the attention, "but the main one is oxygen. You know, the stuff that makes things burn." If the class had been shocked before, they were now utterly flabbergasted. Blorp, the amorphous blob, actually split into 2 separate entities out of sheer surprise before hastily pulling himself back together. Professor Zxylop's eye stalks were spinning so fast they were in danger of unscrewing themselves. "Oxygen? The highly reactive element responsible for combustion and corrosion? You willingly introduce this into your respiratory system?" Dave nodded, grinning from ear to ear. "Every second of every day, Prof. Can't live without it." A small, insectoid creature named Zzzik buzzed anxiously. But how do you not spontaneously combust?" Dave couldn't contain his laughter any longer. He doubled over, tears streaming down his face, while the alien class watched in a mixture of horror and fascination. To them, it looked like the human was malfunctioning, expelling water from its visual organs and making alarming noises. "Oh man," Dave wheezed, finally regaining his composure, "you guys are too much. We don't combust because our bodies are designed to use oxygen, not be destroyed by it. It's part of our cellular respiration process." Professor Zxylop, ever the scientist, couldn't resist asking for more details. "Cellular respiration. Could you elaborate, Mr. Dave?" Dave scratched his chin thoughtfully. "Well, I'm no biologist, but from what I remember from high school, it's how our cells convert nutrients into energy. Oxygen plays a crucial role in that process." The class was scribbling notes furiously, or in some cases secreting mnemonic slime. This was turning out to be the most exciting galactic sciences class they'd ever had. But surely a crystalline being named Shimmer chimed in, her facets glittering with curiosity. "There must be safer elements your species could have evolved to use. Why oxygen?" Dave shrugged. "Evolution's a funny thing, I guess. Oxygen is pretty abundant on Earth, our home planet. Plus, it's great for energy production. Sure, it can be dangerous, but so can a lot of things. We've just adapted to handle it." Professor Zxylop was practically vibrating with excitement. "Adapted? How so?" Well, Dave began, warming to his subject. Our lungs are specially designed to take in oxygen and expel carbon dioxide. Our blood has these things called hemoglobin that bind to oxygen and carry it throughout our bodies. And we've got all sorts of antioxidants to help protect us from oxygen's more destructive tendencies. The alien students were hanging on his every word, their various appendages scribbling, tapping, or oozing notes at a frantic pace. But wait, Blorp burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with confusion. If oxygen is so reactive, and you're filled with water, how do you not, explode or something? Dave chuckled. It's all about balance, my gooey friend. Our bodies are amazing machines that keep everything in check. We use oxygen, but we also have systems to protect us from its harmful effects. It's like having a controlled fire inside us all the time. The class collectively shuddered at the thought. Fire was not a popular concept among the gathered species, most of whom came from worlds where combustion was rare or non-existent. A controlled fire, Professor Zxylop repeated, his voice modulator struggling to convey the mix of horror and fascination in his tone. That's metal as hell, Dave suggested with a grin. The idiom was lost on the aliens, but they got the general idea. This human, this Deathworlder, was casually describing processes that would be lethal to most of them. But surely, Zzzik buzzed, his wings fluttering nervously, your species must suffer frequent casualties from these internal fires. Dave shook his head, still grinning. Nah, not really. I mean, we can get sick or have health problems, sure, but spontaneous combustion isn't really a thing for us. Our bodies are pretty good at keeping things under control. The class exchanged glances or whatever passed for glances among their varied species. The idea that a species could not only survive but thrive with such dangerous elements as part of their basic biology was mind-boggling. Professor Zxylop, ever the educator, saw an opportunity. Class, what can we learn from this? What does Mr. Dave's biology tell us about the adaptability of life? There was a moment of silence as the students pondered the question. Finally, Shimmer spoke up, her crystalline voice ringing clear. It suggests that life can evolve to thrive in conditions we might consider hostile or even lethal. The human ability to utilize oxygen and water demonstrates that what's dangerous for one species can be essential for another. Excellent observation, Shimmer, Professor Zxylop exclaimed, his gelatinous form quivering with approval. Any other thoughts? Poof, the gas bag, who had partially deflated earlier, reinflated himself to speak. It also shows the importance of understanding alien biology before making assumptions. We might have thought humans were constantly in danger from their own biochemistry, but in reality they're well adapted to it. Dave nodded approvingly. You guys are pretty sharp. That's exactly right. Just because something's dangerous to you doesn't mean it's dangerous to everyone. Heck, I bet there are things in this room right now that would kill me in seconds, but you all seem fine with them. The class looked around nervously, suddenly very aware of their own alien nature in relation to the human. Indeed, Mr. Dave, Professor Zxylop agreed. For instance, the atmosphere in this room contains trace amounts of methane, which is perfectly safe for most of us but could be harmful to you in large quantities. Dave's eyes widened slightly. Methane? Like fart gas. The class tittered nervously, their various forms of communication creating a bizarre symphony of clicks, whistles, and squelches. Air, yes, Professor Zxylop confirmed, his voice modulator struggling to convey embarrassment. Some of our students required for their metabolic processes. I assure you, the levels are quite safe for you. Dave laughed, a booming sound that caused several students to instinctively activate defensive mechanisms. No worries, Prof. I grew up with 3 brothers. A little methane never hurt anybody. The tension in the room eased somewhat, replaced by a growing sense of camaraderie. Despite their vast biological differences, they were all here to learn, to understand each other better. So Dave said, clapping his hands together and causing poor Blorp to momentarily lose cohesion in surprise, what other questions do you guys have for me? I'm an open book. A forest of appendages shot up or out, or in some cases oozed upwards. The excitement in the room was palpable. Mr. Dave, a serpentine creature named Hiss, began. Is it true that humans engage in a practice called exercise where they deliberately stress their bodies? Dave grinned. You bet. Gotta keep this Deathworld body in shape somehow. We lift heavy things, run long distances, swim, climb. You name it, we've turned it into a workout. The class was aghast. Deliberately stressing one's body was a foreign concept to most of them. For many species present, conserving energy was the norm, and the idea of expending it unnecessarily was bizarre. But why? Hiss pressed, his forked tongue flicking out in confusion. Surely such activities increase the risk of injury or premature expiration. Dave shook his head, still smiling. Nah, it's actually the opposite. Regular exercise makes us stronger, more resilient. It improves our cardiovascular health, builds muscle, helps maintain bone density. It can even boost our mood and cognitive function. Professor Zxylop's eye stalks were practically tied in knots as he tried to process this information. Fascinating. So the controlled application of stress actually improves your overall function. Yep, Dave confirmed. It's like, well, You know how some materials get stronger when they're put under pressure? Like how carbon turns into diamonds. Our bodies are kind of like that. The stress of exercise breaks us down a little, but we build ourselves back up stronger. The class was furiously taking notes again. This was turning out to be more informative than a whole semester of Xenobiology textbooks. Poof, reinflated to his full gaseous glory, spoke up next. Mr. Dave, we've heard rumors that humans regularly expose themselves to dangerous radiation. Is this true? Dave looked confused for a moment, then burst out laughing. Oh, you mean sunbathing? Yeah, I guess that could sound pretty crazy from an outside perspective. Bathing, Professor Zxylop repeated, the unfamiliar term causing his voice modulator to produce a series of confused beeps. You bathe in the radiation from your star. Well, when you put it like that, it sounds insane, Dave chuckled. But yeah, we do spend time in the sun. It helps our bodies produce vitamin D, which is important for bone health. Plus, a lot of us just enjoy the warmth. The class was stunned into silence. The idea of voluntarily exposing oneself to stellar radiation was beyond comprehension for most of them. But the damage to your cellular structure, Shimmer exclaimed, her crystalline form vibrating with concern. The potential for mutations, for cancerous growths. Dave nodded soberly. You're not wrong. Too much sun exposure can be dangerous. That's why we use sunscreen, limit our time in direct sunlight, and get regular checkups. It's all about moderation. Professor Zxylop was frantically trying to keep up with all this new information. Moderation. You mean you knowingly expose yourselves to a potentially lethal source of radiation, but only in small doses? Pretty much, Dave confirmed. It's like a lot of things in life. A little bit can be good for you, but too much is harmful. We've evolved to need some sunlight, but we've also developed ways to protect ourselves from too much of it. The class was abuzz with chatter, each student trying to process this seemingly contradictory information. A species that deliberately exposed itself to radiation, but also took measures to protect against it. It was mind-boggling. Mr. Dave Blorp burbled, his gelatinous form rippling with curiosity. Given all these seemingly dangerous aspects of human biology and behavior, how has your species managed to survive, let alone thrive? Dave smiled, a softer expression than his earlier grins. That's a great question, Blorp. I think it comes down to a few things. First, we're incredibly adaptable. Humans can survive in all sorts of environments, from scorching deserts to frozen tundras. We're not the strongest or the fastest, but we're really good at figuring out how to make things work for us. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Second, we're curious. We're always trying to understand the world around us, which has led to all sorts of scientific and technological advancements. And third, we're social creatures. We work together, share knowledge, and support each other. That's been a huge factor in our success as a species. Professor Zxylop's eye stalks were practically glowing with excitement. Remarkable. So your species' success isn't just about physical adaptations, but also behavioral and social ones. Exactly, Dave exclaimed. Our biology is just part of the story. Our brains, our ability to learn and adapt, our social structures. They all play a huge role in why we've managed to do so well on our little death world. The class was silent for a moment, absorbing this information. Then, slowly, appendages began to rise again as more questions bubbled to the surface. Mr. Dave Zzzik buzzed. You mentioned that humans can survive in various environments. How do you manage that without specialized biological adaptations? Dave grinned. 2 words, opposable thumbs. Okay, that's a bit of an oversimplification. But our ability to manipulate our environment is a big part of it. We create shelters, clothing, and tools that allow us to survive in places our bodies aren't naturally suited for. He held up his hands, wiggling his fingers. To the alien students, it looked like a bizarre display of dexterity. These bad boys, combined with our big brains, let us shape the world around us. Can't survive in the cold. Build a fire. Too hot. Create air conditioning. Need to cross a river. Build a bridge. The class was fascinated. The idea of physically altering one's environment rather than evolving to suit it was a novel concept for many of them. But surely, Shimmer chimed in, her facets glittering with curiosity. Such manipulation of your surroundings must have negative consequences for your planet. As Dave prepared to leave, he couldn't help but chuckle to himself. Here he was, a regular guy from Earth, teaching a class of aliens about the wonders and weirdness of human biology and culture. If someone had told him a few years ago that this is where he'd end up, he would have thought they were writing some far-fetched science fiction story. But then again, he mused, isn't that the beauty of both science and storytelling? They allow us to imagine the impossible, and sometimes, just sometimes, they allow us to live it too. As he stepped out of the classroom and into the strange, wonderful world of interstellar academia, Dave couldn't help but feel excited for whatever impossible adventure might come next. After all, in a universe where humans could teach alien life forms about the joys of staying hydrated and the thrills of jumping out of perfectly good airplanes, anything seemed possible. And that, Dave thought with a grin, was the most exciting lesson of all.